Well, hey, you guys good? Yeah, it is good to be with you. Those of you joining us right here at Bellevue, down the road at Shadow Lake, super excited to have you as well. Heritage Ridge, online, wherever it is that you find yourself today, we're just glad to be here. How many of you, just out of curiosity, before we jump into the message, how many of you are just tired of the rain? Anybody? Anybody's tired? I'm like, seriously, like, I feel like, I mean, my son plays baseball, and maybe some of you can understand this. It feels like every night we're watching the phone, and we're like, they're going to cancel it tonight, every time. And then yesterday morning, woke up. It was beautiful yesterday, wasn't it? It was a beautiful day, and we're like heading to the ball field. He's got a game at 9 o'clock. We're going to go. We're going to enjoy baseball. And then the other team didn't show up. You laugh. Why are you laughing? Like, try telling your son, like, hey, listen, man, I know that you really wanted to play a game because you haven't played in 4 years. You get to play today, and the other team doesn't even show up. So we went to a parade, and so it was a good time. Got to see a lot of you yesterday at the parade and La Vista Days. How many of you went to La Vista Days yesterday? 3 of you. Cool. That we connected, the 3 of us connected. Hey, here's the deal. If you may have walked around one of our campuses today and you saw a younger face, a college-age face, we got a lot of college students back, but also we have a group of interns back as well, interns and residents. So if you give in any way, shape, or form, thank you for your generosity. Because of your generosity, we're able to have these interns, these residents, spend 10 weeks up to a year with us, and we're excited about having them. And so if you see a face that maybe you don't recognize or maybe a face that's back, be sure to introduce yourself, connect with them. They're going to teach us more than we're going to teach them. I can promise you that. But today, I'd love for us to jump into 1 Peter chapter 4. So if you have your Bible, 1 Peter chapter 4, we're in this series called Bold. And at the very beginning of this series, Scott Beckenhauer, our lead pastor, asked this question. He said, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to read 1 Peter every single week. Every single week, read the book of 1 Peter. So out of curiosity, there's no lying in church, okay? Out of curiosity, how many of you are still doing that or have done that? How many of you are still doing that, okay? A few hands went up. Some of you, you heard that statement of no lying in church, and you're like, I can't do that. Here's what I would challenge you to do. I would challenge you for the remainder of this series, 2 weeks left, I would challenge you to spend time reading 1 Peter every single week from now until the end of this series. 2 weeks away, you can do that. Can you do that? Not that many people said yes, all right? I know the rain got you down today, but let's try this again. Can you do that? Can you read 1 Peter all the way through this week and next week? Can you do that? There you go. All right. And if you can't read through it, here's what you can do. You can download it on the YouVersion app, and you can listen to it on the car. It takes about 12 minutes to read it. If you download it on the YouVersion app and you speed it up to 3, it takes about 4 minutes to listen to it. And some of you are like, well, I can't retain that if it's on a 3. And you're like, well, you're listening to me preach today, and I preach on a 3, right? I already know that. I know. You don't have to tell me. I already know, all right? So there's that. So 1 Peter, hopefully by now I've given you time to get into 1 Peter chapter 4. Now here's what you'll find in 1 Peter chapter 4. You'll find that Peter is very, 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 very direct in his language. He's very clear. He's very articulate. He wants to make sure you understand and I understand and we understand exactly what we're to do, how we're to live our lives. And with that as the backdrop, let's jump in. 1 Peter chapter 4, starting in verse 1, it says these words. It says, therefore, hit pause. Anytime you see the word therefore, you have to stop and ask yourself the question, what's the therefore? Oh, some of you already know. What's the therefore? Why is it there? Why does it start out, chapter 4, verse 1, why does it say therefore? Well, you have to go back to chapter 3. At the end of chapter 3, Peter's talking about the life and the death and the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus. And he's saying, because you know that Jesus died on the cross, because you know he was raised from the dead, because you know he ascended into heaven, because you know that, that's the backdrop of the therefore. When you know that, therefore, check this out. Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, everybody say suffered. Suffered in his body, arm yourself. Say arm yourself. He's talking about a military term. Arm yourself. Get ready for battle. It's a military term. It says arm yourself. Arm yourself what? With the same attitude. Everybody say attitude. Now say attitude with some attitude. There you, yeah. Now we're awake, right? Same attitude, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. And as a result, they do not live with the rest of their earthly lives for evil human desires, but rather, don't miss this, for the will of God. When you look at this text, He's saying therefore, and the therefore is important. And the reason it's important is because it points back to a day that looked like everything was going poorly. A day that looked like everything, the bad guys were winning in this moment. When Jesus is on the cross, he's dying on the cross, it looked like the bad guys had won. Everything was mounting against these apostles. Everything was mounting against these disciples. Everything was looking like, man, why did we follow Jesus for 3 years if this is how it ends? And it looks like the bad guys are winning. It says, but because we know that, we need to arm ourselves with the same attitude as Christ. We need to arm ourselves. We need to get ready with the same attitude that Christ has, that we might take every single day and live for him with the same attitude. But here's the truth. A lot of us, we live our lives like the bad guys are winning. We live our lives like we're just trying to maintain day after day after day after day. Like we're not trying to gain any new ground. We're just trying to maintain. I mean, let's talk practical for a second. Let's just talk practical things. In my household, I've got 3 kids, and my kids love Legos. Anybody love Legos in this place? Yeah. My kids, we're just talking like they love a box of Legos. No, they love Legos. They're everywhere in my household, like everywhere. My daughter actually goes to shows and like shows her Legos at shows. Like that's how much we love Legos in our house. It's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle in our household. And there used to be a time in my life when I would go to the basement and I would just see Legos everywhere and I'd be like, we gotta clean this up. We gotta clean this mess up. They're everywhere. Like I'm gonna step on them. These are terrible. I don't like them. They cost too much money. We gotta clean this up. But my tolerance for mess continues to go down as I get older because I realize that I'm not trying to clean up all of this. I'm just trying to maintain it. Right? Like some of you can understand that. We're just trying to maintain it. Another example, let's talk laundry for a second. I heard a collective groan there. Yeah. How many of you, just out of curiosity, how many of you love the process of laundry? Anybody love the process of laundry? Liars. If you raised your hand, you are an absolute, like you love the process of somebody else doing your laundry, but you don't love laundry, right? And you might love parts of the laundry. You might love washing the clothes, 'cause then you get clean clothes. You might love the drying process because you get the wrinkles out. But there's not a single person on the planet that enjoys putting laundry away, is there? There's not one. Who's that one? Is there one in this room? I just gotta know. Yeah, right. Sure. Liars in church is what that is, right? I talked to somebody first hour that was like, I like ironing too. And I was like, you overachiever. Like we try to maintain it, right? We just try to maintain laundry. Like this pile that's here, I'm just gonna maintain it. I don't need to gain any ground. It's like shoveling in the middle of a blizzard. We're just trying to maintain it. We're not trying to gain any ground. We're just trying to maintain it. Maybe some of us are like that relationally. I wanna catapult this relationship to the next level, but I just don't have time. I'm not making time, I'm not prioritizing time, and so I'm just maintaining the relationship and maintaining it so it doesn't go backwards, but it's not gonna go forward. Maybe it's your health. I mean, when I was in my 30s, I used to run so I could eat Oreos, okay? I love double stuffed Oreos, and so I would run specifically, like I'd just be running going, I can't wait to eat 4 Oreos tonight. Like that's how I ran every single day. Now in my 40s, I run so I can look at Oreos. Like that's it. We try to maintain our health. We don't try to gain new ground. Now let's go spiritual. Because I can imagine that in a room this size, and I'll speak for myself, there are days where I can be on a mountaintop spiritually with God. And within an hour, I'm in a valley. I feel like there are times where I can wake up and go, man, God, I'm ready to take on the day. I'm ready to challenge the day. I'm ready to armor up, to put on the attitude of Christ before my feet hit the ground. And then 4 minutes into my drive to work, I'm already upset or angry or frustrated with life or how things went at home or this or that or that, whatever. And if we were truly honest, there's a lot of us that are just trying to maintain our faith. And we're not trying to gain new ground. And what Peter is challenging us here in 1 Peter chapter 4, starting in verse 1, he's challenging us. He's saying, put on the attitude of Christ. What is the attitude of Christ that we need to put on every single day? Because here's the truth. If you go back to Peter's life, Peter was an apostle of Jesus, a follower of Jesus. He saw Jesus go to the cross on Friday. And was there ever a darker day in history than the day that Jesus is on the cross? Especially for someone like Peter. He's given up everything. He's given up his livelihood, his family, everything to follow Jesus. And now he sees Jesus on the cross, dying before him. Was there ever a darker day? It looks like the bad guys are winning. It looks like he's not going to gain any ground. It looks like he's given up ground. But he knows the rest of the story. Therefore, Therefore, because he died and because he resurrected and because he ascended to heaven, therefore, because of that, I need to put on the same attitude of Christ. Paul will talk about putting on the full armor of Christ. It's a reference of putting on something to prepare for what's ahead. Now, many of you know that I am a Chicago Cubs diehard fan. If you didn't know that, or if you're not a Chicago Cubs diehard fan, I will pray for you because you are obviously a sinner, okay? You are. If you're not a Cubs fan, you're a sinner. And so I will make way, I'll go to a lot of games throughout time. And as I go to games, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll have a jersey in my closet that I'll put on. I've got jerseys of some of my favorite players of all time. I've got jerseys of Ryne Sandberg, Andre Dawson, Mark Grace, Rizzo, Bryant. I've got jerseys of all these different greats who've played for the Chicago Cubs. And I'll wear them in the stands. I'll put them on, I'll go sit in the stands, and I'll sit there and I'll watch the game in the stands with the jersey on. Now here's the truth. Never in the history of my lifetime have I gone and I've worn a Ryne Sandberg jersey and somebody's like, hey, are you Ryne Sandberg? Never in the history of my life. I've never been mistaken for a Cubs player, not once. I know I look like Sammy Sosa, but I am not Sammy Sosa. Some of you will get that later, right? I know I've never been mistaken. Not one time have I ever been mistaken for a Cubs player. But I think that's how a lot of us go through life. We put on the jersey of Christ. We'll come into church, we'll sign up to serve, we'll get in a life group, we'll do the thing. But we'll just kind of sit in the stands. We never actually get involved. We might sign up to serve, but we're not actually gonna serve, or we're not gonna give our full effort. We're gonna sign up for a life group, but we're not actually gonna go, or we're not gonna make it a commitment of our life. We might go occasionally, but we're not gonna actually jump in. We'll come to church and we'll sit here, and the moment church is out, we can't wait to get to our favorite lunch spot. We're not gonna apply what we heard, but we're gonna get to our favorite lunch spot. Check it off the box. We put the jersey on, but we've never, ever been mistaken as someone who is a follower of Jesus. We've never been mistaken as someone who is actually committed to putting on the same attitude of Christ. I mean, when he talks about putting on, armoring up, as he talks about that, imagine a soldier for a second, putting on all the armor and going into battle, and they get into battle and they come back and they're like, hey, do you know they're shooting at us? Yeah, because we're in a war. That's right. A lot of us, we don't understand, and we're going to find out next week when we jump into 1 Peter chapter 5. We're going to find out that there's an enemy out there who's wandering around, roaring around, looking for people to devour. That's what it talks about in 1 Peter chapter 5. We'll hit that next week, talking about persecution. We don't understand that there is an enemy out there. And so we need to armor up. We need to put on the same attitude of Christ every single day so that we can take on that opposition every single day. But many of us, we want to view Christianity as walking through dandelions and flowers and just kind of skipping through life. You say, well, that's not what I really believe. Let's talk about your prayer life. What's your prayer life look like? If you have a prayer life, what's your prayer life? Is it bold? Is it bold prayers you're praying? Or is it God bless me, God help me, God protect me, God get me through this? Is it all about me? And maybe for some of us, I'm really stepping on your toes today only because I'm stepping on my own toes. Because here's the truth, a lot of us, and I'll speak for me, I don't wake up every single day ready to put on the attitude of Christ. I just don't. And so what do I need to do? I need to spend time in the Word. I need to actually come in and spend time daily looking through the Word of God every single day. It's why we talked about Rooted just a little while ago. The sign up for Rooted actually ends tomorrow. And if you're not signed up for Rooted, never been through Rooted, man, get in Rooted. It talks about spiritual habits that you can form every single day, getting in the Word, spending time in prayer, spending time serving other people. That when you do that, you're putting on the same attitude as Christ. I've been reading a brand new book called The Common Rule. It's become probably my most formative book that I've read in the last few years. But it talks about putting on these habits every single day, getting in the Word, getting on my knees in prayer, doing the things that are going to drive me towards Jesus every single day, that I might put on the same attitude as Christ. See, a lot of us, we just go through life without putting on the same attitude as Christ. But I would venture to guess that a lot of us need to take on the same kind of lifestyle that a hunter has. Anybody hunters in here or any of our locations today? Any hunters? All right. Hunters, if you didn't know, hunters, they fascinate me. Their whole lifestyle fascinates me. It's not a hobby if you're a hunter. Amen, hunters? Like, you know this. It's a lifestyle. It's not a hobby. I've got many, many friends who are hunters. I'm not a hunter. I know I look like one, but I'm not. But I've got many friends who are. In fact, one of my friends is a pro hunter. He's on the Outdoor Network and sponsored by Cabela's and does the whole thing. And so he's taught me a lot about hunting. If you didn't know this, let me just kind of give you kind of an overlook of what hunters will do. They will talk about hunting all the time. They buy the guns, they buy the ammo, they buy all the equipment. And then what they'll do is they'll find the opening day on the calendar and they'll circle it and they'll sharpen it and they'll make sure that everybody in their whole house, their whole neighborhood, and everybody knows that hunting starts on this day. And if there's something scheduled on this day, they're canceling everything else around it, right? To the point that I've actually met somebody who's had their wedding was supposed to be scheduled on that day. And he's like, you can marry somebody else. I don't care. Like, I'm going hunting on this day. I'm going hunting on this day. And they do all sorts of things to get ready for hunting. They wake up before God. Did you know this? When opening day comes around, I'm a morning person. They are morning people on that day. They wake up before God and they drive sometimes hours out there and they get all dressed up. They have all this stuff that they put on. And then on top of that, they put deer urine on them. Never understood it. If you can tell me why you put deer urine on you, preferably without you wearing deer urine when you tell me, I'd love to know all about that. But they drive and then they get out in the stillness and the quiet. I could do that. But they get out in the stillness and the quiet and then they just wait. And they hope. And some of them pray that they're going to see a deer that's going to walk right by. And many hunters will go season after season after season without seeing or killing a deer. And if you were to ask them, are you gonna give up? They'd look at you like you're crazy. Like, no. Why? All for the hope of seeing and killing a deer. Because they know this truth, they know this principle. If I don't go out there, I have no chance. If I don't go out, I can't get a deer on my recliner. I can't get a deer in my bed. I can't get a deer if I'm sitting in my house. The only place I can get a deer is if I go out there. Here's the truth. There's a lot of us that are expecting the fruit of the attitude of Christ without putting in the work. We're expecting the fruit. You know how I know that? Because a lot of us will ask, what do you think I should do? That's a question you ask. Actually, look in the Bible. What do you think I should do? Maybe you should go here, the source. A lot of us want the fruit without actually putting in the work, without armoring up, without putting on the full attitude of Christ. It's why we talk about life groups so often. It's why we talk about the Bible reading plan. It's why we talk about all of these things that we can do every single day to grow in our spiritual rhythms with Him. Peter's writing this to the first century Christians. And the first century Christians are going through something that we can't even fathom, we can't even understand. There's an emperor named Nero in Rome. And Nero was a terrible, terrible emperor. In fact, he killed his mom. It doesn't get much worse than killing your mom, right? Killed his mom, killed his first wife, and many scholars believe that he killed his second wife as well. He was terrible. He was terrible. And so Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12. So skip down to verse 12. We'll come back, I promise. But in verse 4, chapter 4, verse 12 says this: Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. Now, when he's talking about fiery trials, fiery ordeals, he is being literal. Literal. What he would do is he would take Christians and he would light them on fire as if to make candles or torches for people to walk to make their way into the city. That's just what he did. And so when Peter was writing this message, he said, hey, don't be surprised at the fiery ordeals you're going to go through. That's a little bit different than the persecution you and I face every day, right? A little bit different than the persecution where you're like, it's raining, I don't know if I should go to church today, right? That was the persecution we had today. That's the persecution they're in. He's like, don't be surprised, don't be surprised, don't be surprised. In fact, if Peter were writing this message to us today, maybe it would look very different. Maybe he'd say something like this. If you're in the Middle East, he might say, don't be surprised if you lose a loved one because of their faith. If he's writing to a new Christian in a predominantly Muslim country, he might say, don't be surprised if your family turns on you because of your faith. If he's writing to a freshman girl at a university, he might say, don't be surprised if you don't get a second date because of your stance on purity. If he's speaking to you, he might say, don't be surprised if people make fun of you because of your stance on who you believe Jesus is. In your workplace, in your home, around your family, in your neighborhood, don't be surprised by that. He says, don't be surprised. And I love hearing stories about the first century Christians who, when Peter writes this, they're like, yeah, We're ready to armor up. We're ready to put on the full armor. We're ready to arm ourselves with the attitude of Christ. That's who we are. They're just bold in their faith. And can I just ask that we might be bold in our faith as well? This past week, I had the privilege of going to Joplin, Missouri. It's one of my favorite places. I went to a place called CIY, Christ in Youth, their headquarters. And CIY changed my life. When I was a teenager, CIY changed my life. In fact, the reason I'm in ministry today is because of the ministry of CIY. And a lot of our staff, that's the same as well. And so this week I had the privilege of going to their headquarters, and we're getting ready for the summer conference. Summer conference is a conference put on all across the United States. In fact, our students will go. Our high school students will actually go to a conference in Lincoln, Nebraska. And we decided that we were going to get together on Thursday night. We're just going to pray for the summer. So we started praying for the leaders and started praying for the students, started praying for the speakers and the band and the travel, and just started praying for just the logistics of the week itself as they put these on all across the United States. And then it began to shift in the room. And we just started praying for boldness. Boldness for students, boldness for leaders, boldness for youth pastors. We just began to pray for boldness, saying, God, would you change schools because of what you're going to do in the lives of these students? Would you change families? Would you change neighborhoods and ball teams? Would you begin to change those around the individuals who find themselves at this conference, no matter what conference they go to, that God, you would make these students bold. You would make them like the first century Christians. See, I love the way the first century Christians begin to respond in persecution. When nothing threatened them at all. People would be like, we're going to beat you to death. And they'd be like, I'm convinced that the sufferings of this world are not worthy to be compared to the glory that shall be revealed. Like they're just quoting scripture back. We'll kill you to live as Christ and to die as gain. We'll destroy your message and kill you. Yeah, you killed Jesus. How'd that work out for you? We'll shut you up. We'll put you in prison. We got some writing to do anyway. And they wrote the entire New Testament. They were amazed. They were bold. When he says arm yourself with the same attitude of Christ, he's saying be bold, be bold. And then he goes on, verse 3. For you have spent enough time, everybody say enough time. I love that. I've had it up to here with you guys. You spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do, living in debauchery and lust and drunkenness and orgies and carousing and detestable idolatry. They are surprised that you do not join them in your reckless, wild living and heap abuse on you. He says, don't take sin lightly. He says, any sin in front of a holy God is still sin. And then he gives a warning. He says, people who are living like this, living in sin day in, day out, they don't understand why you wouldn't also live, because they don't understand the therefore. They don't understand why the therefore was there. They don't understand that Jesus died, resurrected, and ascended into heaven and is preparing a place for us. They don't understand that. And so because they don't understand that, they don't understand why you won't live for yourself. Why you won't spend all your money on yourself, why you serve other people. They won't understand that. He's giving them a warning. And then he goes on, verse 5. But they will have to give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is the reason the gospel was preached, even to those who are now dead, so they might be judged according to human standards in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to the spirit. And then verse 7, I love verse 7. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. So they're going to have to give an account for the way that they're living their life. Much like you and I will have to give our account for how we live our life. That how we live our life matters. And then he says, therefore, be alert and of sober mind so that you might pray, because the end is near. Peter wrote this 2,000 years ago. So the end is near 2,000 years ago. Well, that means it's more near today than it was then. And so how are you living your life? Are you living your life in a way that the end is near? Are you preparing that the end is near for you? Or are you like, well, there will be a tomorrow. There will be another tomorrow. You ever gone to the playground with your kids? When you go to the playground with your kids and you say, hey kids, 5 more minutes. What do they do when you say 5 more minutes? What do they do? They're like, we're gonna do everything. We're gonna do everything we're gonna merry-go-round, we're going on the swings, we're going to the splash pad. If there's not a splash pad, we're gonna create a splash pad. Like, we're doing everything right now. You give me 5 minutes, the end is near, we're doing all the things, right? I love how the psalmist says this, says, teach us to number our days that we might gain a heart of wisdom. James will say, the brother of Jesus will say, hey, your life is like a vapor. It's here one day and gone the next. The return of Christ is imminent. Are you living your life as if there's no tomorrow? Are you living your life on purpose every single day? And you say, well, there's plenty of tomorrows. I got plenty of tomorrows left. Think about this. For a 2-day-old, tomorrow is half their life. Isn't that crazy? And some of you are like, I've got so many more tomorrows. Do you? Heard a story this past week about a patient who went into the doctor. The doctor said, I got good news and I got bad news for you. The good news is you got 24 hours to live. The patient's like, what's the bad news? I was supposed to tell you yesterday. I mean, that's how we need to live our life. That's how we need to live our life, right? We need to live like it matters. Do you have the same attitude as Christ? Well, what does that attitude look like? So glad you asked. Check out the last section in this verse, 8 through 12. Above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. I love that text, but I feel like that text is written specifically to me. And specifically to me, especially when I'm at a restaurant and the server or the waiter refuses to write my order down, right? You ever been there? I'm one of those people. I have a lot of pet peeves, and some of you are gonna be like, you're pretty shallow, man, and that's fine. You can believe that about me if you want. But one of my biggest pet peeves is if I go to a restaurant and they don't write my order down. Not like my order's complicated, but here's the truth. I don't like tomatoes, okay? I just don't. Anybody else? Anybody with me? Godly people right there, okay? I don't like, they're from Satan. I almost said another, they're from Satan. Tomatoes are, okay? You can put that on a t-shirt. Tomatoes are from Satan. Anyway, when I go to a restaurant and I order a hamburger, I order something and I'm like, hey, no tomatoes. And they're like, gotcha, man, gotcha, boss. I'm like, not your boss, and you better have really written that down somewhere. And then what happens is, and you know this, right? Some of you are like, you're pretty petty. And then if you put yourself in my shoes, you're there. There are times when the plate will come out and it's just all tomatoes. That's it. And I'm like, if you would have just wrote it down. If you could have just wrote it down. And then I read this. Thanks, Peter. Above all, love each other deeply. I'm like, but it's hard to love somebody who can't get my order right. Love covers a multitude of sins. Dang it. Offer hospitality without grumbling. Oh, that one got me. Because if you just wrote it down, then we wouldn't have this problem, right? Each of you should use whatever gift you have to serve others. If you speak, you should speak as if you're speaking on behalf of God. I mean, it's perfect, isn't it? See, I don't wake up with all of these things on. I have to wake up every single day and say, God, would you give me love to extend to others? Would you give me hospitality without grumbling that I might help others? Would you give that to me so that when I find myself at a restaurant and they get the order wrong, imagine if the scenario's changed. Imagine if they get the order wrong and instead of grumbling, instead of yelling, instead of asking them to take it back, what if all I said was, hey, is there anything in your life that I can pray for you for? I mean, can you imagine how that would change the conversation? What if they told me something that is heartbreaking, and so in that moment, I'm sitting in Applebee's and I'm just praying with somebody? It changes it, right? I mean, can you imagine instead if they just bring me a plate of tomatoes and I'm like, hey, bro, all you brought was tomatoes. I asked for no tomatoes. Can I pray for you? That changes it, doesn't it? That changes it completely. If I come with love, come with humility, come with hospitality, come ready to serve other people. If I put that on daily, that changes the situation. I have to ask God to put that on me every single day. See, but I think a lot of us, we don't wake up with that kind of mentality. We wake up with a my way kind of mentality. We wake up with a Burger King mentality. You know that? I'll have it my way. Like, that's how we go about our day. I'll have it my way. Nobody else's way, I'll have it my way. In fact, if you're a Christian or not a Christian, here's the truth. All of us have a way. And the way that we have is based upon how we grew up or circumstances we've gone through in our life. How you grew up are the variables that make up who you are. It allows you to govern your life in a specific way. In fact, some of us, we grew up poor. I had a friend who said that he grew up so poor, he'd go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and lick other people's fingers. Like, that's how poor he was. Some of you can get that later. It's a good one, okay? Some of us grew up middle class. We don't have enough, or we have just enough or whatever, and so we're trying to navigate that. Some of us grew up rich. And the relationships that we have because we were rich, the way people treated us, the way we treated other people, it changes the way we live our life. Some of us, the birth order changes the way we view our life, right? Some of you, how many of you are the oldest out of all of our locations? We're the oldest, all right? Who are the middle? Okay, you're forgotten about. Who are the babies? All right, I'm a baby as well. How many of you are the favorite? How many of you are only children? How many are the least favorite? Sorry, don't do that. Don't. Sorry, I'll be available after service for counseling. Your birth order changes the way you live life, right? It changes that. It changes that. Maybe where you grew up changes that, right? If you grew up in the burbs or the sticks or the mountains or the base or the hood or the south or the north or the beach, the lake, the woods, all of those are major variables to the way that you live your life, the way that you govern your life. If you grew up with parents who stayed together or parents who got divorced, that changes the way that you do your life. Did you know the first followers, first century Christians that Peter's writing to, they weren't called Christians. Did you know that? They're called the way. And it comes from when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. They're followers of the way. And what they would do is they would bring all of their variables of how they live their life, and they would sit them all on the table and be like, you know what? That's who I was, but who I am is I'm going to be totally surrendered to Jesus' way of life. That I'm going to put on the attitude of Christ every single day. And that's what I propose we do today. That no matter what variables have brought you to this point in your life, that every single one of us, whether this is your first day in church or you've been in church for 100 years, that every single one of us could say, you know what, there's some ways of my life that I could turn over to him. I could surrender to him. I love the proverb in chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. It says this, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways submit to him and he will make your path straight. I would like for us to just consider, how many decisions are you and I making where we're leaning on our own understanding, not on God's understanding? How many decisions are you making every single day where you're leaning on your own understanding? I'll go first. Too many. Too many. I make way too many decisions based on my own understanding of how things look. I'll give you 4 reflective questions and we'll be done today. Number 1, are you thinking rightly about God and eternity? Are you thinking rightly about God and eternity? Like when you think about the way that you think, are you thinking rightly about that? Are you thinking rightly about God and eternity? I mean, there are a number of us who've been coming to church for a while, been putting on a jersey and sitting in the stands when it comes to serving, when it comes to giving, when it comes to getting in a life group, when it comes to baptism. We've been putting on the jersey and sitting in the stands and not actually thinking rightly about what does it look like for me to take the next step in that journey with Jesus. You're just maintaining, you're just shoveling in a snowstorm. You're just maintaining. Are you thinking rightly about God and eternity? Question 2, are you living in light of God and eternity? Are you seeking earthly pleasures, earthly pursuits, or eternal pleasures and eternal pursuits? Are you living in a way that says, you know what, I'm putting on the attitude of Christ every single day? Are you living in light of God and eternity? Number 3, are you praying in light of God of eternity? I mean, I could stop with just the first few words. Are you praying? And then keep going. Are you praying in light of God and eternity? Your prayer should reflect what you believe about God. The therefore, your prayers should reflect therefore type of prayers, bold prayers, asking God to do immeasurably more than we could ever ask or imagine. That should be our prayer. And number 4, are you using the gifts God has given you to serve others? Are you using the gifts God given you to serve others? Are you waking up saying, God, would you allow me to serve other people? And here's the challenge. I'm gonna give you one challenge real fast. We talked about it earlier. We're 8 days away from Vacation Bible School. And if you're not currently serving at Vacation Bible School, can I just invite you to sign up to serve? Because here's the truth. You'll put on the attitude of Christ at Vacation Bible School, I promise you that. You've never, ever, ever had to serve hospitality without grumbling until you've got a bunch of kids going through snacks and they want the red thing instead of the blue thing. You've never had to deal with that, right? You'll serve, you'll offer hospitality without grumbling. You'll love, you'll never understand love. And love covers a multitude of sins until you got a bunch of kids running around with a garden hose outside at Vacation Bible School game time. Like, it's a real thing. If you are not currently serving at Vacation Bible School, I want to invite you. Come, put on the attitude of Christ and serve other people. Here's the truth. Vacation Bible School is our biggest outreach event of the year. The amount of people who come through our doors at any of our locations who are far from Jesus or far from church, the amount is exponentially larger than any other thing we do. You want to show the love of Christ? You want to share the attitude of Christ, wear the attitude of Christ? Come to Vacation Bible School, serve at Vacation Bible School. It's super easy. Here's the truth before you leave today. If you're a guest, we are so glad that you chose to be here with us. We've got a t-shirt we'd love to give you. You can go to the Welcome Center out the doors and to the right at any of our locations. Our Welcome Center is right there. We'd love, love, love to know who you are and how we can serve you. For the rest of us, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you simply before you leave today to say, God, give me the same attitude as Christ. Give me the same attitude as Christ. Allowing to love others, allowing to serve others, allowing us to offer hospitality without grumbling. That the words that I use would be your words. The way that I serve others would be the way that you would have me serve. Before you leave this place, do not walk out of here today without asking God to give you the same attitude as Christ, and then do that day after day after day, and we'll see you back here next week. Let's pray. God, I thank you. I thank you for today. And I thank you for your words of who you are and what you've done in and through and for us. And so, God, I pray that today, before we walk out of here, we would have the same attitude as you, that when we go to lunch today and the server gets it wrong, because they will, that God, you will begin to show us what grace looks like and love looks like. That God, you are so much bigger than the things that we go through. And that God, that we can count on you day in and day out. And so God, allow us to put on that same attitude that you give us. God, we love you and we thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. Have a good week. We'll see you back here next week.